Welcome back to CX Unplugged, everybody. Today, I am your MC, Casa Tranafilu. Honored and ecstatic to be joined by our special guest, Dan Gigas, the experience maker, and our very own Chief Revenue Officer for SAP Customer Experience, Jen Balin. How are you both doing today?
Awesome, Costa. Thanks for having us.
Excellent. Couldn't be better.
Likewise, it's always our pleasure. Thank you for joining us from across different regions of North America, all on different time zones. A very important topic today, the future of sales. My quick observation, sales is pivotal to every organization, obviously. We can't exist without it. There's no revenue coming through. There's no employees, and there's no one for us to talk to. I'm going to let you all take it away. I'm going to disappear off camera. Over to Dan and Jen. Have a fantastic conversation, and we'll catch you at the end.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Costa. Welcome, everyone, to CX Unplugged. Very exciting topic today because, as Costa mentioned, sales is such a critical part of every organization. And I would posit that it is the beginning of any customer experience. It's actually the experience before the experience, right? We buy from people that we like. As we're hunting for different companies to solve our business problems, we're talking to different salespeople. And the experience has already begun, which is why that sales process is so critical. So, Jen, I want to start with a question. Obviously, the last 2 years have upended almost everything in business, and we've had to rethink the way that we do almost every piece of our business. How would you say that sales has changed over the last couple of years from both the seller's perspective and the buyer's perspective?
It's such a great question. So first of all, it's good to just be here with you today talking. So thank you for making the time. And when I get a chance to speak with someone else in the industry who's as passionate as I am about customer experience, but also understands that sales has such a huge part to do with that, it's just exemplary for me. So I'm going to enjoy the next half hour or so with you. So thank you. But I'll say this, I've been in the industry for 25 years as a sales leader in the technology industry, specifically working with brands of all sizes to address this problem. How do they actually see their customers in the marketplace? Is it a virtual marketplace? Is it a digital marketplace? Is it phygital? There's new words we're coming up with to describe the situation that we're in right now. And I'd say here's what's changed. The customer now, which I will boldly call the post-pandemic customer, because I think we're there, expects brands and companies in all industries to know them. So that's a big difference that I think is happening. In the past, and I have a big background in financial services specifically, which is a compliance-driven industry. If you looked at public sector or government, if you looked at financial services, if you looked at healthcare, those were industries where end customers, whether it be people like you and I or companies, would give personal information with the expectation that there's almost that balance of trade. If I give you that personal information, I will have a personalized experience. The doctor will look at that patient record and give me advice. The financial advisor would look at my situation and give me advice. And if it was an institutional relationship, give that personalized company advice. And what we're seeing right now is that we expect as consumers, whether we're people or whether we're businesses, so B2B, B2C, B to everyone, we're expecting to be known. We want to make sure that when we're marketed to or a brand reaches out to us, that it's personalized. It's not going to waste my time, that it's going to be worth my time to click that button because you know me so well. You know what I already bought. You know that I have children, so I'm not likely going to open up my very first checking account. You should probably reach out to me about something that is for the life phase that I'm in. And that's what consumers expect right now, is that connectedness around data that we have decided to share with the brand, regardless of industries, being relevant right this second so that we can act on it.
Yeah, very well said. I mean, every survey that I've seen shows that consumers are willing to give up privacy in exchange for personalization. They
Yes.
understand the trade-off, right? I'm going to give you information about me, but then therefore I want the experience to be reflective of me and my needs. And I think in the sales space, we often revert back to old sales tactics, more like a spray and pray model, which is, hey, let's just send out 1,000 of the same email and hope that a few people answer us. And, I look at this often from the buyer's perspective because I also have about the same amount of years of experience, but in the buyer's seat instead of in the seller's seat. And, I always try to remind salespeople, your buyer is probably getting 100 to 200 emails today and
Yes.
tomorrow and the next day. And so if you're going to approach them via email, you better be doing something that is going to get their attention, that is going to make them realize that maybe you're a little bit different than everybody else that's trying to get their attention. So I definitely agree with you. And I do think that's a change. I wonder, just as a follow-up, do you think, what about the pandemic do you think caused that to be exacerbated? Because I think it was probably there before, but I agree with you that I think it's far more important right now.
So it's a good question. I've thought a lot about this. I think that people like you and I had experiences with brands that we didn't have before because our routines were disrupted. So if you think about it from the retail perspective, we may in the past, if we were going to go on a business trip and you don't like going and picking up your dry cleaning, perhaps you go buy a new white dress shirt before you go each time to the same department store. And you may walk into the department store and you have somebody that you like there and you shake their hands and they know your measurements and they help you with that dress shirt. The pandemic threw that all to the wind. And so now we're at a point where people like you and I actually were disrupted. We actually had as a forcing factor to go online and experience those same physical brands online. And you started to see some disruption happening. So, as a for instance, there, you may have felt irritated in feeling like you had to go in and look up your sizes and not have that brand know that there was a connection between the last time you bought, probably going to buy the same size this time, and then even a connection to the back end supply chain. So maybe you actually order something and then you get a notification that you've ordered it. Wonderful. And then you get a notification 2 weeks later that that's not in stock and actually your purchase was disrupted. Wouldn't you wish to find that up front so that you could make a different purchasing decision at that point in time and not have your life cycle be thrown off? And that's what consumers are looking at now. They're saying, hey, if brands have access to all of their information around inventory and supply chain, then when they sell me something and they transact with me, I expect them to be transparent and share that to my benefit. So that's what I would say to your follow-up question.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would just add on to that I think this equally applies to B2B transactions. A lot is not said in the sales process until the contract is signed. That's when we learn it's going to be a 6 to 12 month on-ramping process, And
Yes.
so setting those expectations early, making it very clear about what's going to happen, and who's going to be involved in it, is so critical to setting the right intentions and expectations into the experience. So we actually asked a number of people that signed up for this event ahead of time. We asked them a question that we want to share the results of. We said, what are the biggest challenges that are impacting your sales strategy? And I thought this was really interesting, Jen, because we gave 4 possibilities: a change in the buying process, customer channel preferences, finding your audience, and internal alignment. And you know what? They all got a whole bunch of votes. There isn't necessarily a clear winner. What do you think when you take a look at this?
So a couple of things jump out at me. I mean, obviously there are two that are the big ones there, the customer channel preferences and then the internal alignment. I would say as it relates to channel preferences, I think the world is changing a bit here. So in the past, email might have been the right way to connect with someone. But for people like you and I who work all day long and want to make sure that we're polite in the meetings that we have, we're usually not looking at emails during meetings. But if we notice during a quick break that a text notification comes through, that might be the way that we want to interact. There's also new channels that are coming up now as well. So you think about the metaverse, or you think about today, we may see that in the gaming model where somebody who's gaming can actually click to buy a pair of shoes. Now, they might today be buying a pair of shoes that they put on their avatar for the purposes of the game, but is that a new channel so that in the future, if you click to buy it in your game, can you also click and send it to me, the real person, as well, because I like those shoes and I want to wear them at home. And so I think that the channels will start to disrupt our day-to-day life, meeting us where we want to be met. So I would say that first here. As it relates to internal alignment, I would say that it has a lot to do with actually knowing the customer. And so when I think about internal alignment, I mean, how do we actually serve the customer on the channels in the way that they want to be served? And then also use all of the internal information that we have to actually give them a transparent procurement experience or life cycle experience. And I would say that's something else that's changing. When I do business with a brand as a human, a person, not a business person, but as a person, I really do expect to have a relationship with that brand, perhaps past the point of transaction. And I would say the same thing is true in the B2B world. In most cases, more often than not, in the B2B transaction space, businesses only start working together if they usually have solidified that that vendor is a solid vendor to work with and they expect to do business with them that's repeat in the future. It's very rare that there's just a one-time transaction that would happen. They leave the door open for more. And so that internal alignment is very important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you definitely hit on two of the main challenges that are emerging. I would add to the idea of channels in the B2B space for sure. I've always been surprised at how undigital the buying process is. We're so used to, as consumers, to an e-commerce model in which we can pretty much go online and purchase anything from a pair of socks to a new car. And yet when we want to purchase SaaS software, when we want to purchase some other B2B item that we're going to buy for the business, that does not have an equivalent digital process. It's much more manual. It's much more in person. And I wonder why. I think that, the argument is probably going to be, oh, well, our stuff is so complex, which might be true. Although I would argue, I would counter back to say that one of the cornerstones of a great customer experience is simplicity, not complexity. So if complexity is our excuse, then I would suggest we look at ourselves in the mirror and perhaps try to eliminate the complexity first. But I think you definitely made some good points. Are there anything else that comes to mind that maybe wasn't on the list that you think has been a particular challenge?
So I would say supply chain connectivity has been huge over the last year. I mean, this is where if companies are able to tell buyers, here's what we have to give to you, to sell to you, to give you an experience around over the next 30 days or over the next 7 days or at the time you want to purchase, that can be both a competitive advantage and it can also be a competitive positioning opportunity in the marketplace, because we can show customers, or a brand could show customers what they want them to see and not necessarily set expectations that something that isn't going to be available is there when it won't be. And so as we enter into the holiday season, I think that connectedness to supply chain is really key, because it will give the opportunity to delight customers. And at the end of the day, customers make decisions one time and the repeat transactional decisions based upon the experiences that they're having. And they share, we all know the stats, right? If you're happy, you share your story with maybe one person, 4 people or more. And so find those folks out there, a broader voice than most. I think that the average person is really looking around in their network to see whether or not their friends and family members are happy with the brands that they work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to remember that customer expectations are always evolving. And, I always think, to me, whenever there's a conversation about e-commerce, you have to bring it back to Amazon, because it is the leader for a reason. And what Amazon has done is it has retrained our expectations of how long things take, of how easy things are. I had to order a new oven because my oven conked out right ahead of Thanksgiving. And I ordered from a major retailer, and the first delivery date is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And
Wow.
that's almost 2 weeks out. And I'm nervous because if anything happens, then I'm going to be in big trouble since I'm hosting. But that's a long time to wait for anything nowadays. And I think, one of the other things about Amazon that I always love to come to, and I think this is so instructive to other organizations, is just look at one piece of the experience of Amazon, which is the returns process. And look at how over the last 4 to 5 years, they have continued to beat themselves. They have continued to improve on their own experience. It's not about beating the competitor. It's about how can we make this the easiest part of the transaction possible. And we all know that it started with, well, you had to print out a label at home and you had to pack up the box and bring it to the post office. And then there were various stages where we could drop it off at Kohl's or whatever. And now you don't even have to put it in a box. You don't need a label. You can just sort of bring it to the store and boom, it's done. And it is so easy that now that becomes the expectation. And we've skirted around this a little bit, but I want to make sure we hit on this point, is that B2B salespeople, you are not selling to a building. You're not selling to a logo or to a corporation. You are selling to a person.
Yes.
And guess what? That person or a group of people, that person or that group of people, they're consumers. And so, and they shopped at Amazon this week, almost guaranteed, right? So they have those same expectations, even if they're buying a, $500,000 SaaS product, they have the same expectations that it's easy, that it's fast, that it's convenient, and that it doesn't take so much time, that there's not that level of complexity. I know you guys, you at SAP, you have so many clients in both the B2B and B2C space. Do you see that same dichotomy?
I do. We do. And I absolutely agree with you. I think that we're one of the only vendors in the world that for most of our products and customer experience have B2B, B2C, B to everyone on one platform. And it is so that we can drive the capabilities across exactly what you said, all those multiple dimensions. Because in one situation, we may be working directly B2B with a business, but it's very possible that if they're thinking about their business structure, they could either have a current revenue model today that does give them the opportunity to work directly with a consumer, and then on the back end also connect with a supplier. So they might be B2B and B2C. And in other cases, what can happen is we can help them open up brand new revenue channels. And we're seeing that nearly every day now. I mean, there was a phenomenon that happened over the last few years where as companies were trying to figure out how to connect with their customers and what their customers wanted, in many cases, they would just leap right over some of the middlemen as a part of their distribution model. And so we're seeing more of that continue, not in all cases, but in many cases where they just want to have the opportunity, these businesses, to have a platform that is agile and resilient, so that if something were to happen again, they could flip on a business model that is more proactive for them to drive delightful customer experiences. And the last thing I would say is, at the end of the day, like you mentioned, we're all people, and it's all about that expectation setting. And so when I'm working with my team and thinking about how we delight customers, we're trying to make sure that we work with our clients to experience their own brands. Because there was a stat I read recently that said nearly 70% of executive officers haven't experienced their own brand in the last 12 months. So you think about that, right? That's a quick, easy opportunity. And that might be my number one tip for folks now is ask yourself when the last time was you experienced your brand, and does it align with what you expect as a human?
Oh, I think that is absolutely perfect. And oftentimes when I'm asked for my number one tip, I say it in almost the same words. I say, become a customer of your own company. Because if you think about it, we as business people view the experience from this perspective. Okay. The customer is viewing it from this perspective. It's like a mirror image. And so if you only are looking at it one way, then you're seeing the mirror. You're not seeing the way that the customer sees it. a great example of this real quickly is I just learned this recently. I was doing some work in the dental industry, and I learned that most dentists have their office in the back of the building and that there is an external entrance in the back. And the reason they do this is because they don't want to walk in the morning through the waiting room with lots of people waiting and basically, see people annoyed. And I say to them, look, that's fine, but it's wrong. You need to, on occasion, I say at least once a week, walk in through the front door so you see what your patients see, so that you see that there's fingerprints all over the door, so that you see that the magazines haven't been replaced since before COVID and you still have people from, February of 2020, so that you see that the coffee machine is broken and nobody wanted to tell you. So you don't ever see those things unless you are the customer or are the patient. And so that different perspective is absolutely critical. I want to ask our audience to please be sure to put any questions that you have into the comments section. And also, just as sort of a fun game, I would love for you to put in what your favorite brand is right now. What is the brand, when you think of great customer experience, what's the brand that comes to mind for you? It could be a huge brand like an Amazon. It could be a little mom and pop shop down the street. But give kudos out to the brands that remind you of great customer experience that you would love to emulate in your business as well. All right, so we have a couple more minutes, Jen. I want to look forward because obviously we titled this The Future of Sales. And so we've discussed a little bit about where we are and some of the challenges that companies are faced. I'm wondering if you can put on your prognosticator's hat and look into 2023 and beyond, and tell me what you see. What do you think we should all be looking out for?
I think it will all be about ease and simplicity. So from the consumer perspective. So in order to create that as a business or as a company or as a seller, you have to remove all of those roadblocks that exist today for your customers in doing business with you. But let me get a little bit more specific. We oftentimes think inside out. I want to sell something to Joe. I want to sell something to Jane of this company. But what we don't think about is all of the different doors that Joe or Jane are going through to interact with our brand. So there's the transaction engine, but what about billing? What about payments? What about all of the other pieces, those microservices that have to do with the experience that they have? And you brought up one, which is big, returns. So inventory, each of those pieces. So I think that if brands actually start to think about how they can make it seamless for people and businesses to do business with them, that will be a leap ahead into the future. And then if we really leap ahead into the future, it's being bold enough to say we need to get away from some of the older, antiquated ways of interacting with humans and actually start diving into the channels where they do business every single day and where they live every day. So not just the formal text reach out. I think that may be even antiquated in 5 years. I think it's about how do you catch me? How do they catch you while you're interacting in your day-to-day life, and then make that product or service something you just can't live without or that you would miss if you didn't have it. That's what I see for the future.
I love it. I read a study in the Harvard Business Review that said that the number one indicator of customer loyalty is reducing customer effort. And you
Yeah.
said it's about simplicity, about removing the objects, the barriers to doing business with you. And unfortunately, lots of companies, B2C and B2B, put a lot of barriers up. I always joke with people when I tell them to become a customer of their own company, be sure to log into your website, but be sure to forget your password, because that process is super fun in almost every business, right? But
Right.
why doesn't somebody fix it? Because they're not going through it themselves. When we reduce customer effort, and I experienced this firsthand when I was at Discover Card leading the digital experience, when you reduce customer effort, when you get out of your customer's way, satisfaction goes through the roof, because all people want to be able to do is take care of business quickly and efficiently and conveniently. And oftentimes all businesses want to do is stop them in their tracks and throw up a marketing campaign or do other type cross-selling or whatever it is. And that's not really thinking from the perspective of the customer. It's more thinking from the perspective of the business.
Yeah.
Well, Jen, when you and I first chatted about this, I think we both agreed that we could talk for 3 hours. And we're going to have to plan that for another day, because Costa was very firm with me that I had to hand it back to him after 25 minutes. So, Costa, it's back to you, my man.
I was about to hit the end broadcast button, so everyone's lucky here. Thank you for passing. It was a fantastic conversation. A lot of insights there. A lot of coin terms that I'd really picked up on. Emotional aspects, we're human beings at the end of the day. Obviously, supply chain, something that we missed. And just in general, it's just that feeling of being almost loved, I think, by a brand. That's something that we expect as consumers as well. A give and take relationship. I've given you something, we need something back. It's time for us to do what we call on CX Unplugged our final thought, a very short little segment where we love to give our guests a short little period of time to summarize everything that they've just mentioned. There's a lot of good pieces of information that people can take away from today's conversation. But I want to start with you, Dan. What's your final thought?
Well, Jen, I'm not going to steal your final thought, even though I would normally have said it. I'm going to let you have that one. I'll come up with a different one, which is, it seems like an obvious one, but man, if it were that obvious, we'd all be doing it. Know your customer and understand that no two customers are exactly the same. Everybody comes at your product or service from a different perspective. They might live in a different part of the country. They might be of a different race or gender identity or sexual orientation or religion or political background than your next customer. And that means they're perceiving the experience in their own way. It doesn't mean anybody's right or wrong. It just means everybody's different. And we've got to be aware of that fact. And I think Jen said it really well when she said, we got to be where our customers are. Too often we ask our customers to come to us, and we need to be where they are.
You're one of the first commandments of the sales testament from Dan Gingiss, know thy customer. Let's continue adding to that sales testament and see how many we can come up with. I want to flip it over to you, Jen, very quickly. What's your final thought?
Well, here's what I would say. There's an exercise I have done for years in executive briefing rooms when I bring executives in to understand more about the value that we have to offer. And it's called the Lego exercise. And as I'm writing the agenda on the board, I simply say, here's a box of Legos, divide into two teams, and please build me a house. And I emphasize the word me, build me a house. And once I turn around, they tell me about the house they built for me. And something that happens every single time, and I'm sure this isn't a surprise, is you have these high-powered people that are fast-moving, and they forget to ask me what I want my house to look like. So all of a sudden, they've built me something that I may not want. They don't know if it's 1-story, 2-story. They just did it really fast, and they're eyeing each other as competition. So the advice that I would have would be just pause and figure out what your customers really want and check in the last time you asked. Was it a different period of time? Was it a different chapter in our world? Is that in tune with what customers want today? And don't make any assumptions, because fortune favors the bold. And I think right now, boldness is about getting in the shoes of your customer.
And it's almost like organizations need to start measuring twice before they actually go ahead and cut, right?
There you go.
I wanted to thank you very much again to our guests today, the always amazing Dan Gingiss, the experience maker, and our very own Jen Balin, Chief Revenue Officer here from SAP Customer Experience. I deeply thank you for joining this show today and giving us your opinions on where the future of sales is heading.
Thank you.
My pleasure, Costa. Next time I expect those 3 hours.
Oh, well, you got it. Let's just make it 10. Let's just make it even 10. That's a nice round number. And there we go. We can join the CX Unplugged marathon when we start to air all our episodes back to back. Before you all leave from us, please do feel free to email us at CX Unplugged if you have any ideas, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show and have your own opinions. And I'd like to give a special shout out to all of those who are celebrating Movember. I've tried to rock this curled mustache as best as I can for you all. Join us in 2 weeks on October 29th for our next episode called a holiday extravaganza as we really deep dive into the data trends that are going to shape the holiday season. Thank you very much, everyone, again for your time, and we'll see you in our next episode. God bless.
Thank you.